I had been in uniform for more than 20 years, and nothing I'd seen in Iraq, Afghanistan, or Germany prepared me for what waited in Washington. My father's funeral at Arlington looked like every other military ceremony. Precision, flags, rifles, a folded banner. But for me, it was the end of a life I barely recognized anymore. Colonel Harold Crossman had built Crossman Defense and Logistics from a tiny supply firm into a major Pentagon contractor. But at home, he was the man who taught me how to clean a rifle and how to read a balance sheet. I stood at attention next to the casket. My sister Margot a few feet away in a black designer suit, camera ready even at a graveside. She didn't look at me. We hadn't been close for years. I'd chosen active duty and deployments. She'd chosen boardrooms and lobbying dinners. Dad had always said the company needed both sides of the family, but only one side ever got headlines. The funeral crowd was full of contractors, retired generals, and senators' aides. When the last salute was fired and the last handshake offered, Margot disappeared into a black SUV with tinted windows. I drove myself to the law office where the reading of the will would take place. The conference room at Alerton and Fox LLP smelled of leather and expensive coffee, mahogany table, floor-to-ceiling windows, and a row of suits from the board. I was still in my Class A's. Nobody bothered to hide the way they stared at my ribbons and name tag as if I'd crashed a private club. Margot sat at the head of the table next to the managing partner, legs crossed, scrolling her phone. She had always been good at setting a stage. The lawyer cleared his throat. "We're here to execute the last will and testament of Harold Crossman," he said, and the room went quiet. He read through a few boilerplate paragraphs, and then without drama announced that Margot Crossman inherited the controlling shares of Crossman Defense and Logistics along with $30 million in liquid assets, properties, and associated rights. The suits nodded like they'd rehearsed it. And to his daughter, Lieutenant Colonel Evine Crossman, he went on, he bequeaths. The man hesitated and glanced at Margot, who smirked. "This envelope, I'm sex." He handed me a plain legal-sized envelope. No seal, no wax, no fancy handwriting, just my name typed in block letters. A couple of the board members exchanged looks. Margot put down her phone and said, "Well, that's fitting, isn't it?" The soldier gets the paperwork. I kept my face blank the way the Army had taught me. "That's it?" I asked. "That's all that's specified here," the lawyer said. "There may be other instruments or trusts, but this is the will on file." Margot leaned back. "Dad wanted the company in steady hands. You've been away for 2 decades. No offense, Eve, but you wouldn't even know the current contracts." I didn't answer. There were a dozen times in my life when I'd been tempted to punch someone. This was one of them. Instead, I slipped the envelope into my briefcase. The room buzzed with small talk again. Plans for the next quarter, upcoming audits, who would take which office. I stood up, straightened my jacket, and walked out without a word. The hall outside felt colder than the cemetery. I drove back to my small apartment near Fort Myer. It was the kind of place Army officers pick when they know they'll be on the road more than at home. Functional furniture, a coffee maker that worked, nothing fragile. I put the envelope on the kitchen table and stared at it. My hand smelled of gun oil from polishing Dad's medals that morning. Margot had her empire. I had a single envelope and 1,000 questions. I made a pot of coffee and sat down. The envelope weighed almost nothing, but my stomach felt like a sandbag. I thought about Dad's last visit to Germany. He'd asked me odd questions about security clearances and trusts, and I'd brushed him off. Maybe I shouldn't have. He'd also asked me if I still trusted Margot. I'd laughed. Now it didn't seem funny. I tore the flap carefully. Inside was a folded letter and a stack of documents bound with a paperclip. The letter was handwritten in my father's precise block script. "Evine, you gave your life to serve the country. You never asked for shares, bonuses, or titles. I couldn't protect you from your sister's ambitions, but I can arm you now. What's in this envelope is not charity. It's responsibility. You're the only one who can save the family name, Dad." Underneath the letter was a Swiss bank statement showing $75 million in my name. Another document was a Delaware trust granting me 55% of Crossman Defense and Logistics voting shares effective immediately. The rest of the packet was evidence, photocopies of contracts, wire transfers, and memos suggesting bribery of procurement officials and kickbacks on overseas deals. All of them bore Margot's signature. I leaned back in the chair. For a long minute, all I heard was the refrigerator humming. Margot thought she'd cut me out. Dad had given me a weapon instead. Not a rifle this time, but a paper trail that could take down a CEO. I read through the evidence twice, making notes in the margins like I would for an operational briefing. Every page tightened the knot in my stomach but sharpened my focus. I turned on my laptop, opened a secure Army email, then stopped. This wasn't an op order or an intelligence report. This was my family. If I moved too fast, I'd blow my dusty envelope mystery, a secret that could change everything chance. If I waited too long, Margot might bury the trail. I needed a plan, and I needed allies who knew how to handle both military law and corporate crime. I poured another coffee and looked at Dad's handwriting again. "You're the only one who can save the family name." It wasn't sentimental. It was an assignment. I'd been given plenty of those. This one just happened to involve my sister, $30 million, and a company supplying the Department of Defense. I started a list on a yellow pad, people I could trust, steps to take, documents to secure. At the top of the list, I wrote 2 names from memory, old comrades who had been through messes with me before. As the coffee cooled, my pulse slowed. The sting of humiliation was still there, but it was being replaced by something steadier, more familiar. Operational focus. I had an objective now, and objectives could be achieved. Outside, traffic on Route 50 hissed through the rain. In the apartment, the envelope lay empty on the table. My phone buzzed with another message from Margot. Something about signing disclaimers and moving on. I didn't open it, not yet. The pen on my yellow pad pressed harder as I wrote the next step. I flipped the page over and dialed a number I hadn't called in years. The phone rang twice before a man's voice came on, deep and steady. "Barlow," he said. "It's Aveen Crossman," I replied. "I need legal eyes on something off the books." "Hab," there was a pause. "You still in uniform?" "Yes," I said. "And this is an Army business. It's personal, but it touches federal contracts." He exhaled slowly. "If it's personal and federal at the same time, it's bad. Meet me where?" "Union Station, South Hall Coffee Bar, 30 minutes. I hung up, stuffed the documents back into the envelope, and locked it inside my go bag. Years of deployments had taught me how to carry sensitive material without drawing attention. I pulled on a plain trench coat over my uniform, left the apartment, and drove through drizzle into DC traffic. Union Station was busy, but anonymous, perfect for conversations you didn't want on the record. I spotted James Barlow at a corner table, same square jaw but heavier now, his tie loosened. He had been a bulldog jag in Baghdad, the kind who read every clause before kicking down a contractor's door with a subpoena. "You look like hell," he said as I sat down. "I buried my father this morning." He nodded and didn't offer condolences. Instead, Hess lit a coffee across to me. "Show me." I passed him the envelope under the table. He opened it carefully, eyes scanning the Swiss bank statement, the trust papers, and the photocopied contracts. His brow furrowed. 55% voting shares, he said under his breath. "Your sister's cooked." "I need it airtight," I told him. "If this goes public, it has to stick." Hef flipped to the last page. "This is enough to start, but you're still on active duty. If you move wrong, she'll say you're abusing your position." "That's why I called you," I said. Barlow leaned back. "I'll run the paper through a friend at Treasury to verify transfers. No one knows your name yet? Keep it that way." I glanced over my shoulder. No one seemed to be paying attention. "I also need someone who can dig," I said. "Someone who understands military contracts, not just white-collar crime." Barlow smirked. "You're thinking Karen Holt." "Exactly. She still does forensic work out of Quantico." He said, "I'll call her." I handed him a burner phone. "Use this. Don't text me on my Army line." Barlow pocketed it. "You're running this like an op." "It is an op," I said. "Target my sister. Objective. Stop her from burning down what's left of our father's legacy." We finished our coffee in silence. He left first. I stayed another 5 minutes, shredded a receipt into tiny pieces, and dumped them in separate trash cans. Old habits die hard. Driving back toward Arlington, I thought about Dad's letter. He hadn't given me instructions. He'd given me a live grenade. Margot wouldn't sit still once she sensed a threat. I had to be faster. Karen answered on the second ring. "Hall, it's Crossman. I need a quiet consult." She laughed. "Last time you called me, we were stuck in a hangar eating MREs. All this time it's worse," I said. "Are you free tonight?" "For you?" "Sure." We met at a nondescript diner off Route 29 where truckers outnumbered suits. Karen arrived in jeans and a leather jacket, still moving like an investigator who didn't trust anyone. "Barlow gave me the short version," she said, sliding into the booth. "You've got a sister with sticky fingers and a pile of evidence. That's the polite way to put it. Let me see." Nut. I handed her a duplicate set of documents I'd prepared at FedEx under a fake name. She read fast, lips tightening. "She's got APR-signed contract with Riverdale Veterans Care," Karen said. "Effective next week. Your name is on the intake paperwork as a proposed patient. Diagnosis line blank." My jaw clenched. Building a case. Military. Officer turns to Allies for Justice. She's already filed to have me declared incompetent. Looks like she's setting it up. Karen said she'll bring in a compliant doctor, get a temporary guardianship, and by the time you're out of the psych ward, she'll have moved the money. I took a slow breath. How do we stop it? Karen smiled without humor. "Build a better trap. You're a colonel. You know how to stage a battlefield. This is no different." She made a list on her napkin. "Get a hidden recorder. Plant an audio bait. Alert a contact at FBI white-collar unit. Verify Swiss account. We need to move in phases," she said. "First, you act normal. Let her think you're stunned. Second, we gather more evidence. Third, we hand it to the feds before she makes her move. Barlow's handling Treasury," I said. "You handle the contracts. I'll handle my sister." Karen nodded. "You sure you're ready for this?" "I've planned logistics for combat brigades," I said. "I can plan one operation on K Street." We paid cash and left separately. I drove back through the wet streets, headlights reflecting off puddles. In the glove box sat a tiny digital recorder Karen had given me, smaller than a thumb drive. I flicked it a pen and closed, thinking about the dinner Margot had invited me to later in the week. Back in my apartment, I spread the documents on the table again. Bank statements, trusted, contract copies, and now the Riverdale paperwork with my name typed neatly at the top. The weight of betrayal was heavy but clean. It told me exactly what needed to be done. I drafted an email to Margot on my personal account. "Looking forward to dinner. Need to discuss Dad's funeral arrangements. No hint of anger, no mention of the envelope, just polite family business." I hit send and set the burner phone next to the recorder. I opened my father's letter one more time, not to read it, but to feel the paper between my fingers. He hadn't been sentimental. He'd been strategic. He trusted me to finish what he started. That was something I understood. I put the documents back into the envelope, sealed it in a fireproof bag, and slid it under a loose floorboard I'd installed for weapons back when I first moved in. Then I stood up, stretched the stiffness from my shoulders, and looked at the clock. In 48 hours, I'd be sitting across from Margot at an upscale restaurant, smiling while she tried to size me up. The night outside was quiet, except for the hiss of cars on wet pavement. In the kitchen, the empty envelope sat like a spent shell. It picked up my phone, scrolled to a number marked Fed Contact, and hesitated with my thumb over the call button. Not yet. Timing would matter. For now, the plan was simple. Act calm, collect proof, and let my sister believe she'd already won. I locked the door, switched off the lights, and went to my desk to finish the list Karen had started. Each bullet point was an action. Each action a step closer to turning the tables. The humiliation from the law office had burned off, leaving something sharper in its place. The operation had begun, and I was in control of the timeline. I picked up the burner phone and dialed the number I'd scribbled on the napkin. Karen's number before I second-guessed myself. "I'm on my way," she said. No hello, no small talk. She always cut straight to work. That was why I called her. She didn't do drama, she did facts. We met at a small rented conference room off Chainbridge Road so we could spread paper without attracting attention. James Barlow arrived 20 minutes later with a slim briefcase and the look of a man unused to being surprised. He'd already called a contact at the Treasury Department. When he said he had, it sounded like a promise. "First rule," he said without preamble. "You don't touch anything that could be construed as a classified asset on your watch." He didn't need to be mean to be effective. He laid out 3 folders on the table: the Swiss bank statement, the trust documents, and the photocopies of contracts with enough red flags to fill a caution tape factory. Karen tapped the Riverdale contract with a pen. "This is proactive," she said. "This didn't appear after the will reading. This was filed in advance." She pointed to the signature block. "Name of the executive, date filed, all clean. Your name's typed under the proposed intake. That's not an accident." Barlow folded his hands. "We verify the Swiss account through proper legal channels. We run financial forensics on the contracts. We don't go public. If Margot smells subpoenas coming, she'll start shuffling money and hiring cleanup teams." He gave me a look that said he knew how much I could take on and how far I'd go. "I don't plan on making noise," I said. "I plan on making certainty," Karen grunted. "Good. Certainty is lethal." We gave tasks and deadlines. Barlow would call his contact at Treasury to start a quiet verification of the Swiss transfer and put a watch on any outgoing wire moves from Crossman Defense and logistics accounts. He would also contact a trusted private forensic accounting firm, clean, discreet, and experienced with defense contractors. Karen would run a corporate trace. She'd pull procurement histories, check subcontractors, and first countermove in a family. Revenge story serve a few friendly subpoenas under a DBA that wouldn't flag the family name. She'd also use a friend at the C who could run a conflict of interest check on the procurement officers Margot had been dealing with. "If we find one crooked procurement officer," she said, "we'll find a trail." I added items to the list. Secure counsel, for personal matters so my military role didn't mix with family business. Hire a private security detail to monitor my apartment and my car and set up an off-site safe for the original documents. I told them about the floorboard stash, and they both rolled their eyes in unison. "You're an old-school prepper," Karen said. "Good. Keep those originals off base and off network." She handed me a tiny digital recorder disguised as a thumb drive. "Plant this on the dinner table. Let her think she slipped up." Barlow looked at the recorder and smirked. Classic tradecraft colonel. "You really are doing this like an operation. You taught me logistics." I said, "This is just a different kind of mission." Barlow's first call went through that afternoon. He left a message with a Treasury analyst, careful with words, so the message couldn't be intercepted if anyone got curious. Within 2 days, police state patience would be needed. Legal confirmations, international checks, everything that sinks or swims in paperwork. Karen's results arrived faster. She called in the evening. "Margot's corporate structure is aggressive," she said. "Shell companies in Cyprus and 2 LLCs in Delaware. There's a pattern: contracts routed to companies that then subcontract to vendors owned by offshore partners. That's how money flows out without raising alarms." "Any direct links to procurement officers?" I asked. 2 names pop up repeatedly. "I'll pull background files. One of them was just promoted last year." "We may have a pipeline." She didn't say it, but that pipeline would lead to people who could make or break a contract, the very people Margot likely greased. The practical side of the job landed on my shoulders. I needed to control optics. I called a bank in downtown Alexandria and set up an escrow account under a trust Barlow had drafted. It wasn't flashy, but it was legal and untraceable back to my active duty account. I wired a small tranche of funds from the Swiss account enough to cover audits, security, and the kind of legal fees people thought politicians paid when they weren't watching. Barlow handled the paperwork. He told me flatly, "You're doing the right thing. Don't log this on any military system." I booked a private investigator to check Margot's calendar, her recent flights, and whether she'd been meeting anyone from the procurement office off the record. PI reports have a way of neatly proving what board minutes hide. The investigator called me 3 days later with a recording of Margot laughing over lunch with someone I'd never heard of, a lobbyist with a habit of buying expensive bourbon for underlings. It wasn't damning on its own, but it was color. Color matters in a trial. Barlow threaded the legal pieces together while Karen built the factual map. Between them, the path forward came into focus. Collect more evidence, bait Margot into showing intent, and get the right federal partners involved quietly. If we could hand a sealed packet of verified documents to the FBI and Treasury with matching timelines and bank verifications, the agencies would have jurisdiction. They'd move. That meant we couldn't be the ones to expose it. We had to be the ones to deliver a rockalid file and let the government strike. We planned the bait carefully. Margot loved ceremony. She liked to watch people scurry. Dinner would be an act, a public, highly curated meal at a restaurant where Margot felt in control. I'd go as the beautiful daughter. I'd let her brag. I'd steer the conversation only just, and I'd make sure the recorder was in place. The goal wasn't to catch her in an act of bribery. The goal was to get her to speak in a way that confirmed intent words you can put in a transcript. Karen set up an alternate cover, a fictional charity event that Margot had agreed to sponsor. It gave us the pretense for the dinner without advertising family tensions. We would look like we were negotiating adenation. In the background, Karen had already started contacting a trusted agent at the FBI's white-collar unit. He would stand by, ready to pounce if we handed him evidence that met his standards. As the hours turned into the next day, I went through a list of contingencies. If Margot left the table and called her lawyer, we'd document that. If she got nervous and tried to move funds, Treasury's watch might catch it. If she attempted to start the competency process early, Barlow would file emergency protective motions citing the trust documents and my military status. The contingency plans were granular: who to call, who to notify, and what phrases to use to avoid tipping our hand. On the personal side, I notified one trusted sergeant at Fort Myer to cover my absences and keep my military responsibilities in order. I didn't tell the base why. He respected the chain of command and my privacy. I also secured a modest, well-reviewed security team to ride with me to any public meeting. They were discreet, unbranded, and professional. In this world, appearances matter less than paperwork and presence. The night before dinner, I rehearsed. I practiced smiling on the drive to work, measured my responses to likely questions, and decided not to volunteer anything. I was not there to make a statement. I was there to listen, to gather, and to let time and proof do the sisters' plot exposed. Attempt to declare me incompetent rest. When I finally slept that night, I didn't dream of funerals. I dreamed of cross-checks, audit trails, and deposit slips. Not because it's romantic, but because it's what would work. The envelope on my floorboard had gone from symbol to blueprint. I had allies, a plan, and a timeline. Margot thought she'd written the final chapter. She hadn't. She had written an early paragraph in a book I intended to finish cleanly. And by the book, I smoothed out the navy dress uniform jacket and watched the cab's taillights fade from the apartment window. The documents were already locked in a secure briefcase on the dining table, and the little recorder Karen had given me sat hidden inside a lipstick case in my purse. Tonight wasn't about appearances. It was about control. Margot had chosen a pricey bistro in Georgetown she liked to show off. She wanted to be seen. I wanted her to talk. I arrived early, checked my bag with the hostess, and asked for a corner table. When she came in, she was all designer silk and false warmth, trailing a younger associate carrying a tablet. She air-kissed my cheek like we were still sisters planning family vacations. "You look tired," she said, smiling the way a predator does before a bite. "Running an active-duty logistics unit will do that," I answered, not giving her an inch. Dinner started with surface-level chatter. She bragged about new contracts, hinted at her burden of managing the company alone, and then began steering the talk toward my personal life. I let her, careful not to flinch. She poured wine I didn't drink. You've been under a lot of stress since Dad passed, she said softly. Maybe it's time to think about your future. Somewhere peaceful, somewhere with professionals to look after you. The younger associate nodded as if reading a script. We can help you transition, Colonel, he said. It's normal at your age to feel overwhelmed. I kept my eyes on Margot and said nothing, letting the recorder catch every word. Karen had told me, don't feel silence. Let them fill it, Margot leaned in. We're not your enemies, she said. We just want what's best for you. You don't have to keep worrying about complicated finances. That's our job now. I tilted my head. Is that so? You've already arranged something? Her smile flickered but recovered. We've looked into a facility. It's comfortable. It would free you from all this pressure. I saw the younger associate glance down at his tablet. Contracts intake forms just like Karen predicted. My pulse stayed steady. Years of field exercises had taught me that. I reached into my purse, took out my phone, and placed it on the table. That's thoughtful, I said. Tell me more about this facility. What kind of contract have you signed on my behalf? Margot blinked. We haven't signed anything. Interesting, I replied. Because I've reviewed a deposit to Riverdale Veterans Care made 2 weeks before Dad's funeral using company funds. Her eyes narrowed. You've been snooping. I've been reading what belongs to me. End quote. The younger associate tried to interrupt. Mrs. Crossman. Perhaps this isn't the I cut him off with a glance honed on lieutenants who'd misfiled cargo. I'm still Colonel Crossman to you. For a moment, the table went quiet, except for the clink of cutlery at other tables. Then Margot shifted gears. You're making a mistake, she hissed under her breath. You don't know who you're dealing with. I know exactly who I'm dealing with, I said, leaning closer so only she could hear. And I know every offshore company you've been funneling money through. She sat back, stunned, the mask slipping just enough for me to see the panic underneath. You wouldn't go public, she said. I smiled lightly. I don't need to. Other people will handle that part. She pressed her napkin to her lips, recovering her poise. You always did overestimate your ability to win, Evine. Not this time, I said. I let the conversation drift to safer topics after that. She boasted about future deals, vacations, politicians she claimed to know. I kept nodding, but every few sentences she dropped hints of her plans. Control, protecting me, shifting assets. Each time she slipped, the recorder caught it. When dessert menus arrived, I declined. I have an early briefing tomorrow, I said. Duty calls, she forced a laugh. Always the soldier. Back at the apartment, Karen and Barlow were waiting with laptops and legal pads. We plugged in the recorder and Karen ran audio analysis while Barlow highlighted lines in the transcript. She confirmed intent twice, Karen said. Mentioned facility, mentioned assets, implied she'd already moved funds. Barlow looked grim. This is enough to open a preliminary inquiry. Treasury will flag outgoing wires. FBI will want a full package, but this is a good start. I took off my uniform jacket and laid it over the chair. Good. Make the calls. What divided next steps? Karen would deliver copies of the audio and transcripts to her FBI contact. Barlow would file emergency motions to secure my rights as majority shareholder under the trust, temporarily freezing any asset transfer requiring my signature. Expect blowback, he warned. She'll know you're not passive anymore. I'm counting on it, I turning the tables. Evidence to the FBI and taking control said. We moved to the next action, an internal audit at Crossman Defense and Logistics under my authority as majority shareholder. We'd presented as routine compliance to avoid tipping off employees loyal to Margot. At the same time, Karen would interview a procurement officer she suspected of taking kickbacks. I also asked Barlow to draft a formal revocation clause for the public-facing inheritance. If Margot violated ethical standards, I could legally suspend her management authority. It wasn't dramatic. It was just leverage. The following morning, I walked into the Pentagon for my routine duty. Outwardly calm, inside my head, the plan clicked forward like a logistics chain. My phone buzzed with a text from Karen. FBI contact says, proceed. Keep collecting. Don't confront directly again. I texted back a single word. Copy. During a lunch break, I slipped into a secure conference room and reviewed the Swiss account activity on a secure laptop. Funds were steady. No new withdrawals. Good. At 1-400, Barlow called. Freeze order accepted. She can't move any major assets without your counter-signature starting today. Perfect, I said. By evening, the security firm I'd hired had installed discrete cameras at my apartment and checked my car for trackers. They found none, but swapped my car's GPS module. Anyway, at night I sat at the dining table with the transcript spread out. Highlighting each section Margot had said that could be construed as undue influence or fraud. I felt no thrill, just focus. The woman who built spreadsheets for troop deployments was now building a case file. Karen dropped by to hand me a flash drive. Bank trace shows $1 million sent to a Delaware LLC 3 days ago. Looks like a slush fund for the facility deposit. We're matching signatures. Good, I said, tucking it into a folder. We'll add it to the file. Barlow emailed an updated legal roadmap. He wrote like a lawyer, but his meaning was simple. Once we had enough, the agencies would move fast. Until then, no leaks, no media. I closed my laptop and looked at the uniform jacket hanging on the back of the chair. Being in the Army had taught me 2 things: discipline and patience. Both were about to pay off. The next morning started like any other, with a black coffee and a run along the Pedoac. Halfway through, my phone buzzed. The security team had flagged 2 unfamiliar visitors circling my block in a sedan with tinted windows. They didn't approach my door, but they didn't leave either. By the time I got home, the car was gone. It wasn't panic, it was confirmation. Margot had moved to the next phase. I changed into civilian clothes and sat at the kitchen table. The Swiss account balance blinked from my laptop screen. The funds were untouched. My calendar pinged a wellness visit scheduled for noon, an appointment I hadn't made. The caller ID listed no name, just a local number. At 11:55, the doorbell rang. On my security monitor, Margot stood on my porch with her immaculate hair and her false smile. Next to her was a man in a gray suit carrying a black medical bag. Behind them, a woman I recognized as her assistant held a folder under her arm. I opened the door just enough to block the entrance. "Can I help you, Eve?" Margot cooped. "You've been so hard to reach. Webb brought Dr. Connors to give you a quick checkup just to be sure you're okay." "No fuss." The man extended a hand. "Colonel Crossman, I'm a geriatric specialist. This is a routine cognitive assessment." I didn't move. I didn't request an assessment. Margot laughed lightly. "You don't have to. We're family. We worry about you." I stepped back just enough to let them inside, but kept the security camera rolling. The 2 women followed the man as he placed his bag on my dining table like he owned the place. He took out a clipboard and started with a syrupy tone. "We'll just do a few simple questions. What's today's date? Where do you live? Do you remember what you inherited in your father's will?" I looked at him evenly. "It's Wednesday, March 27th. I live at 2380 West Hill, the house I bought myself. Not the one you think you control. And I remember perfectly that my sister inherited Crossman Defense and Logistics and $30 million in assets while I received an envelope you called trash." His pen faltered on the paper. Margot's smile stiffened. "Eve, there's no need to be defensive." "And what?" "I'm not defensive," I said. "I'm aware." The assistant stepped forward with a folder. "We just need you to sign a few things, power of attorney, so we can help manage your affairs." I raised an eyebrow. "And if I don't sign?" Margot's voice hardened. "Don't make this difficult. We're trying to protect you from yourself." I reached into my bag and took out the lipstick case. I set it on the table and clicked it once Karen's recorder was live. "Let's be clear," I said, my voice steady. "My sister Margot Crossman and 2 associates are in my home attempting to have me sign over legal control of my assets under the guise of a medical evaluation. This is being recorded." The so-called doctor froze. "Ma'am, that's not." I held up a photo from the folder Karen had given me. It showed him in the same gray suit accepting an envelope of cash from Margot's assistant outside a courthouse 2 weeks ago. "How much did they pay you for a false declaration of incompetence?" Military precision meets corporate warfare. His face drained of color. I don't know what you're talking about." "I'm talking about this," I said, sliding the photo across the table and about the signed contract with Riverdale Veterans Care, with my name typed in as a resident before my father's funeral was even over. The assistant's hand trembled on the folder. Margot snapped. "This is harassment." "No," I said, standing. "This is me protecting myself. One, I dialed a number on my phone. Barlow, it's Aveen. They're here just like you predicted. Yes, everything's recorded. Margot reached for my phone. Stop this. You're making a fool of yourself. I stepped back. If you touch me, it'll be the last thing you do as a free woman. The room went still. For the first time, Margot's eyes lost their calculation. She looked at the fake doctor who had started edging toward the door. We're leaving, she hissed. You're not going anywhere yet, I said, blocking the doorway. I want you to hear something first. I played the recording Karen had extracted from the company's server. Margot's voice discussing getting rid of her with a procurement officer. It was only 30 seconds long, but enough to crack her composure. This isn't legal, Margot spat. Everything about what you're doing is illegal, I replied. But unlike you, I have witnesses, evidence, and the law on my side. I'm the man with the medical bag muttered something about misunderstanding and bolted. The assistant followed. Margot stayed just long enough to hiss. You're going to regret this. I closed the door quietly behind her. My security camera captured every second. Within an hour, Karen and 2 FBI agents arrived to collect the recordings and photos. They didn't make promises they never do, but their expressions told me enough. One agent asked for a sworn statement. I gave it calmly, laying out times, dates, names. From here on, he said, if she contacts you, call us first. After they left, the apartment was silent. Not a comfortable silence, but a clean one. I sat down at the dining table and looked at the stack of evidence now neatly organized in manila folders. I felt no rush of victory, only the clarity of someone who has finally taken the offensive. I poured myself a fresh coffee, still in my running clothes, and opened my laptop. An email from Barlow was waiting. The emergency freeze on company assets had been extended, and Margot's attempts to transfer funds to her Delaware shell had been blocked. Another email from Karen included a transcript of the dinner conversation with highlighted phrases: facility, protect you, free you from finances. Her note at the bottom read, this plus today's stunt is enough for a sealed affidavit. Your move, and a wreck. I closed the emails and began drafting a statement of my own. Not for the press, not for the public, but for the auditors Barlow had lined up. They would begin their work at Crossman Defense and Logistics the next morning, combing through every contract, every invoice, every offshore payment. The phone buzzed again, a text from an unknown number. You've made a powerful enemy. Think carefully. I deleted it without replying. That night, I went through my father's letters again, not for comfort, but for confirmation. He had known this would happen. He had built a trap inside a gift, and now it was closing. I put the letters back in the safe, locked it, and set the alarm. There was no triumph in the room, only resolve. In the Army, we call it phase lines markers you cross when you've completed a stage of an operation. Today was one of those. I turned off the kitchen light, picked up the manila folders, and headed to my home office. Work remained, and I intended to finish it. I stood at the window the next morning as a light drizzle hit the glass. Below on the street, 2 unmarked cars idled quietly, one of them belonging to my new security detail. They weren't there for show. They were there to make sure no one tried to push me into a van or serve me forged papers. The night before had changed the balance. Barlow arrived at 8 a.m. sharp carrying a hard-shell briefcase. He nodded at the security guard at my door and walked in without a word. Everything's ready, he said, setting the case on my table. We're handing a sealed packet to the FBI today. You're also signing documents to execute your shareholder authority. Karen followed close behind with a laptop and a stack of folders. She dropped them on the counter like she was delivering ammo. Audio's been cleaned up. We've pulled key phrases, timestamps, and matched them to the contract you found in Margot's assistant's bag. It's airtight. I poured coffee for all 3 of us, my uniform jacket draped over the back of a chair. Let's do it. Barlow opened the case and handed me a set of papers. This formally asserts your status as majority shareholder and invokes the emergency ethics clause your father inserted. It gives you power to suspend Margot from any managerial role pending investigation. Sign here and here. I signed my signature steady. What about the board? They don't get a vote, Barlow said. Not under this clause. Karen glanced up from her laptop. FBI white-collar unit's agent in charge is meeting us in 30 minutes. They've already reviewed a preliminary packet. They want the full file and your sworn affidavit. We drove to a nondescript federal building on K Street. No press, no face-to-face with betrayal, confronting my sister flashing lights. Inside a conference room smelled of coffee and carpet cleaner. A middle-aged agent in a dark suit shook my hand. "Colonel Crossman," he said. "Thank you for coming in." I handed him the flash drive. "Everything's on there. Audio, contracts, bank transfers, photos." He nodded and plugged it into a secure laptop. Another agent took my sworn statement on the record. No one cracked jokes. No one made promises. They asked clear, precise questions, dates, names, amounts, how I obtained the evidence. I answered with the same precision I used to brief a commanding officer. When it was done, the lead agent closed his notebook. "This gives us jurisdiction to open a covert investigation. We'll put monitors on the accounts you flagged. We'll need you to keep acting as though nothing has changed." "I can do that," I said. Back in the car, Karen looked at me. "You just turned the key. They'll be watching her now." I exhaled slowly. "Good. Now, let's clean house." And by noon, we were inside the Crossman Defense and Logistics headquarters. For years, I'd walked these halls as a visitor, the invisible partner to my father's empire. Today, I walked in as the owner. Employees stared, whispering as we passed. Karen stayed a step behind me, carrying the folders. Barlow peeled off to meet the corporate counsel. At the top floor, Margot's secretary tried to block the door. "Mrs. Crossman isn't expecting visitors." "I'm not a visitor," I said, pushing the door open. Margot stood behind the CEO's desk wearing a red blazer, her hair flawless as always. "What is this?" she demanded. "This is me exercising my rights," I said, handing her a copy of the signed suspension notice. "Effective immediately. You're relieved of all managerial duty spending ethics review. You're barred from authorizing transfers, signing contracts, or representing the company in any capacity." She scanned the document, her face tightening. "You can't do this." "I just did that." Her voice rose. "This company is mine. Dad left it to me." "On paper," I said, "but legally I own the holding company, and I've already filed with the state to execute the emergency clause. Security will escort you out once you gather your personal items." Karen placed a second document on the desk. "Audit begins today. All staff are instructed to cooperate. Any destruction of documents will be treated as obstruction." Margot glared at her. "You're going to regret this." "No," I said. "You're going to explain to federal agents why you tried to have me declared incompetent while siphoning government contract money through shell companies." Her eyes flicked to Karen, then back to me. "This is a setup. No, this is accountability." She slammed the notice down. "You're not as smart as you think, Evine. You don't know the people I know." I leaned in slightly. "And you don't know how much evidence I've already given them. This isn't a family argument anymore. It's federal." "What?" For a heartbeat, the only sound was the muted hum of the building's HVAC system. Then Margot grabbed her purse and stormed out, the secretary scurrying after her. Employees in the hallway watched wide-eyed as she passed. Karen muttered, "That's one for the cameras." Barlow rejoined us, calm as ever. "The board counsel's on our side. They saw the documents. They're not going to fight you." "Good," I said. "Let's get to work." "Are not." We spent the rest of the day in the boardroom with auditors spreading papers across the table, procurement records, offshore wire transfers, contract amendments, all of it laid bare. The more we dug, the uglier it looked. Inflated invoices, double-billed materials, payments to LLCs with no employees. One auditor whistled low. "This is blatant. Someone thought they'd never be caught." "Document everything." I ordered chain of custody on every file. Digital backups, unencrypted drives that where I walked down to the operations floor mid-afternoon to speak directly to the employees. About 30 of them gathered near the break room. "I know you've heard rumors," I said. "Here's the truth. There's an internal audit underway. It's not about you. It's about cleaning up what's been done above your heads. If you have information about irregularities, you can come to me directly." "No retaliation?" "No exceptions," several nodded. Relief on their faces. A foreman raised a hand. "Ma'am, will the contracts be honored? We've got families to feed." "Yes," I said. "All legitimate contracts stay. Payroll stays. Only the fraud stops." Applause broke out. Out, not loud, but genuine. It wasn't just a speech. It was a promise. Back upstairs, Karen showed me a text she just received from her FBI contact. Monitoring in place. First suspicious transfer the Trap Springs. Family revenge story reaches its peak flagged. Good work. I took the phone, read the message, and handed it back. Let's keep digging. End of by early evening, boxes of documents lined the boardroom walls. The auditors worked quietly, photographing and logging each attempt. Barlow drafted a press release stating only that management changes had occurred to comply with federal regulations. No drama, no names, just fact. When the last employee left for the night, I walked the empty halls alone. The office smelled of dust and stale coffee. But for the first time, it felt like mine. Not a trophy, not a trap, but a command post. I returned to the boardroom where Karen and Barlow were packing up. Tomorrow, Karen said, we'll start interviews with procurement staff. We've already got one willing to talk in exchange for immunity. Perfect, I said, closing a folder. Barlow locked the case and gave me a small smile. Your father would be impressed. I didn't smile back, but I felt a quiet surge of steadiness. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot, but the initiative had shifted. I picked up my uniform jacket, slung it over my shoulder, and walked out of the boardroom with my head high. The hum of the fluorescent lights in the boardroom felt like the drone of a forward operating base at 050 hours. Everyone was in place, auditors along one side of the table, Karen with her laptop open like a mission console, Barlow reviewing a stack of affidavit. I had swapped my uniform for a plain blazer and boots, but my mindset was still that of a logistics officer preparing a campaign. Here's the latest, Karen said, scrolling through bank screenshots. We've confirmed at least 3 offshore accounts tied to Margot's shell companies. All match procurement payments diverted from Crossman Defense and Logistics. This isn't petty fraud, it's a full pipeline. I leaned over her screen. Amount $7.4 million so far. More incoming. Owen Barlow tapped a legal pad. And we have sworn statements from 2 procurement staffers. They'll testify that Margot pressured them to approve inflated invoices. That's federal contracting fraud. The FBI will not ignore it. I nodded. Then we treat this like an operation. Objectives, timelines, contingencies. I drew a simple grid on the whiteboard columns for assets, actions, and outcomes. Under assets, I listed Swiss funds secure, majority shares secure, FBI monitoring active, company audit active. Under actions, I wrote freeze transfers, collect witness statements, restructure operations. Karen smiled faintly. I haven't seen a whiteboard this clean since Sid. This isn't about pretty slides, I said. It's about control. By mid-morning, we had set up an internal command center in a small, unused office down the hall. 2 secure laptops, a locked file cabinet, and a line directly to the FBI liaison. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours. While Karen and the auditors pored over documents, I called an all-hands meeting with senior managers. 30 people filed into the conference room, some nervous, some curious. These were the men and women who had kept the company running under Margot's flashier leadership. I spoke without a script. You all know me. You've seen me at company events. You've seen me with my father. You also know what this company does. It builds things for the U.S. military. That means it's not just a business. It's part of a national mission. Right now, that mission is being compromised by fraud. That stops today. A low murmur moved through the room. I raised a hand. Everyone here who's been honest has nothing to fear. Your jobs are secure. Payroll is secure. But if you've participated in irregular payments or shell contracts, come forward now and cooperate. This is your only chance for leniency. One manager in the back, a logistics coordinator named Bill, raised his hand. Ma'am, if we cooperate, will we still have jobs? Yes, I said. If you come clean and work with the audit, you'll keep your job. If you obstruct, you'll be terminated and possibly prosecuted. He swallowed hard and nodded. Karen took down names of those willing to talk privately. By the end of the meeting, 6 managers had asked for one-on-one sessions. The mood was tense but different. Less fear of Margot, more curiosity about me. Back in the makeshift command center, Barlow looked up from his laptop. FBI liaison just sent over a sealed order. They're freezing one of Margot's Delaware LLC accounts right now. She's going to feel that. Karen grinned. Her lawyers are probably lighting up her phone already. Oh, I didn't smile. Good. Let her. Rebuilding with honor. From revenge to reform scramble. In the afternoon, I drove to the main construction yard, hard hat in hand. It was raining lightly, but dozens of workers were still on site, finishing an affordable housing project my father had started. The site had been mismanaged in the past, but now it was under my direct supervision. Frank, the site supervisor, met me at the gate. Mrs. Crossman, sorry. Colonel never thought I'd see you here in boots. Get used to it, I said. He showed me around the site. Materials were being logged properly. Invoices matched deliveries, and the crew looked relieved. Word travels fast, Frank said quietly. They know you're cleaning house. Morale's better already. I stopped at a half-finished unit where a group of veterans were installing drywall. How's it going? I asked. One of them grinned. Better than before. We're actually getting paid on time now. Their words landed harder than they knew. My father had built this company on contracts with the military, promising quality and integrity. Margot had turned it into a cash cow. Seeing honest work underway felt like reclaiming ground lost to an enemy. I spent the next hour talking to workers, listening to grievances, taking notes. No speeches, no photo ops, just data for my plan. Back at headquarters, Karen had arranged a video call with the FBI liaison. The agent's face appeared on the screen. Colonel, we've reviewed the new witness statements. They corroborate the bank records. We're expanding the scope to include potential bribery of federal officials. Barlow leaned into frame. We'll have additional documents for you by tomorrow. The agent nodded. Well, be ready. When the call ended, Karen exhaled. This is snowballing fast. Good, I said. Then we move faster. I spent the evening rewriting the company's procurement policy. Effective immediately, all contracts over $50,000 required dual sign-off mine and the CFO's and automatic reporting to the compliance officer. No more single points of failure. Barlow prepared a notice to all vendors, new payment procedures, new audit trails, and a hotline for reporting fraud. It was the corporate equivalent of a rules of engagement brief before a mission. By the time the last employee left, the office felt like a different place. The hallways echoed with the low buzz of staff realizing the old order was over. Karen closed her laptop and stretched. You're running this like a battalion. That's the only way I know, I said, glancing at the whiteboard now filled with action items checked off in red. She gave a short laugh. Margot won't see this coming. I didn't answer. My focus wasn't on Margot anymore. It was on the mission. Secure the company, protect the employees, hand the evidence to the feds, and make sure every dollar stolen was traced. As I left the building, my security detail fell in behind me without a word. The city lights reflected off the wet pavement. For the first time in weeks, I felt the kind of clarity I only get on deployment, objective defined. Allies in place, execution underway. The elevator doors opened to the penthouse restaurant. Soft jazz spilling out into the hallway. I had chosen the location carefully, a place Margot liked, but one where the private rooms had discreet cameras built into the walls and a direct exit to the street. My security detail stayed in the lobby. This was my meeting, and he wanted her to feel alone. She was already seated at a corner table with a glass of white wine, scrolling her phone. When she looked up, the practice smile was still there, but her eyes were hard. You asked for this meeting, she said. I almost didn't come. I sat down across from her, placing a slim folder on the table like an officer laying out a map before a briefing. You should have stayed home, I said quietly. She laughed brittle. Oh, please. What are you going to do? Arrest me yourself? No, I replied. I don't arrest people. I hand them over. She tilted her head. You've been busy. Audits, suspensions, freezing accounts. You think you're clever, but you're playing in a league you don't understand. I opened the folder and slid a set of color printouts toward her. Bank transfers from Crossman Defense and Logistics to Delaware LLCs. Shell corporations linking to offshore accounts. Her signature on every contract. I understand perfectly, I said. Margot didn't touch the papers. You've been snooping in things you don't have clearance for. Oh, I don't need clearance to look at my own company's books. I said I'm the majority shareholder and these, I tapped the documents, are crimes. She took a slow sip of wine. You think the FBI will save you? They work with people like me every day. You're a soldier, Evelyn, not a lobbyist. You don't know how the real game is played. I leaned forward, voice low. I know bribes. I know fraud. And eye redemption and power. A military woman's new beginning. Know what you tried to do to me with Riverdale Veterans Care. I have your doctor on tape, your assistant on tape, and your deposit receipts. For the first time, her hand trembled slightly on the stem of the glass. You're bluffing. I pulled out a small digital recorder, pressed play, and let her own voice fill the room. She'll be out of the way before the next quarter. We can move the funds once she's admitted. The sound quality was clear, the date stamped in the corner. Margot's face drained of color. You can't use that. It was privet. It was criminal, I said. She straightened, eyes flashing with anger. You've always been jealous. Dad trusted me with the company because I'm competent. You're just a uniform with no understanding of business. I smiled faintly. Competent people don't need to bribe procurement officers. Competent people don't set up shell companies. Competent people don't try to have their sister declared incompetent to steal her inheritance. And Cray, she slammed the wine glass down hard enough to crack the stem. This is a mistake, she hissed. I have friends who can make this disappear. That's the difference between us, I said. I don't need friends to make things disappear. I need evidence to make things stop. I closed the folder and stood. This is the last courtesy you'll get from me. Resign voluntarily, return the diverted funds, cooperate with the investigation or the FBI will do it for you. She stayed seated, breathing hard. You think you're some kind of hero, she said. You're nothing without me. I didn't reply. I turned and walked toward the door. Behind me, her voice rose, sharper now, shouting something about betrayal and family. I kept walking. Outside, Karen was waiting in an unmarked sedan. She drove off without asking questions until we were a few blocks away. How'd it go? She's rattled. I said she knows we've got her. Karen handed me a tablet. FBI just sent an update. They intercepted an attempt to move $5 million from one of her offshore accounts this morning. Treasury froze it. They've also started quiet interviews with her procurement contacts. 2 already flipped. I scrolled through the updates. Good. Keep pressure steady. No leaks. Back at headquarters, Barlow was waiting with another stack of papers. We filed for full control of the board. He said with Margot suspended and under investigation, you're officially CEO. The board voted unanimously this afternoon. I blinked. That was fast. They've seen the writing on the wall. Barlow said they want stability. They want contracts to keep flowing. You're it. I set the papers on the desk, feeling the weight of a new command. This wasn't a promotion I'd sought, but it was a battlefield I'd been dropped onto. And like any battlefield, it demanded clear orders. First, I said, payroll stays on time. Second, cancel any outstanding contracts with Shell and Tidy's flagged by the auditors. Third, start recruiting replacements for anyone implicated. We need clean leadership before the feds announce anything. Karen tapped a note into her laptop. Also, your speech to the staff tomorrow. They'll expect direction from you as CEO. I nodded. Draft me bullet points. Keep it simple. Accountability, transparency, future of the company that as the office emptied out for the evening, I walked the halls again. Employees glanced up from their desks, some smiling faintly, some wary. I stopped at a display of framed photos. My father breaking ground on the first Crossman warehouse, a ribbon cutting at a VA hospital, me in uniform at a company event years ago. For a moment, the images felt like a chain of command reaching through time, and I was the next in line. Karen joined me. She won't go quietly, she said. She doesn't have to, I replied. She just has to stop. We spent the next 2 hours finalizing the handover. Security badges reissued, passwords changed, access logs printed, Margot's name removed from every authorizing signature. By nightfall, the company's internal systems recognized me's the sole executive authority. In my new office, her old office, I opened a drawer and found a bottle of scotch and a crystal glass. I poured one finger, not as a toast, but as a marker. My father's handwriting still echoed in my head. You're the only one who can save the family name. I didn't drink it. I set it on the desk untouched and pulled out the speech draft Karen had sent. It was short, direct, no jargon. We will operate with integrity. We will support veterans. We will honor our contracts and our employees. We will not tolerate fraud. I leaned back in the chair and looked at the city lights. Margot thought she had me cornered, but she had underestimated how much a soldier learns about patience, logistics, and timing. Down in the lobby, my security details shifted positions. Upstairs, the auditors finished boxing documents for the FBI courier. The company was no longer a playground for my sister's schemes. It was an active zone of accountability. I shut off the desk lamp and left the office, the untouched glass of scotch catching the last glint of light. Rain slicked the pavement outside Crossman headquarters as I left the building at dawn. The street smelled of wet concrete and diesel. Karen had been up all night with the FBI liaison prepping the final phase. We weren't chasing Margot anymore. We were steering her. Back inside my apartment, the kitchen table was covered with printouts, offshore wire attempts, procurement officer statements, and draft contracts for a new vendor Margot had been planning to use. It was the bait Karen, and I had designed a fictional subcontractor complete with a fake website, shell address, and an irresistible offer. If Margot took it, she would be caught moving money under active federal monitoring. Karen arrived with 2 coffees and a hard case of equipment. "All set," she said. "Our ghost company has an account at a bank Treasury controls. She moves $1, they'll see it." Barlow followed her in carrying legal documents. "And here's your authorization as CEO to initiate the contract. Everything's clean. On paper, it's a normal vendor approval." I initialed where he pointed. "Once she bites, we have her," I said. Karen grinned. "We've got the net. We just need the fish." By mid-morning, the fake subcontractor's proposal was uploaded to the secure vendor portal Margot's team still had limited access to. It looked like easy money, inflated invoices, low oversight, high margin, classic bait. I spent the afternoon walking the operations floor, calm and visible. Employees needed to see me steady. Meanwhile, Karen sat in the command center watching Treasury's live alerts. At 3:47 p.m., her phone buzzed. She raised her eyebrows. She logged into the portal from an unregistered IP. "She's looking at the proposal." Barlow glanced at me. "She'll test the waters first." "Lether," I said. At 4:12 p.m., another buzz. Karen's grin widened. "She just initiated a transfer to the ghost company. $50,000 as a deposit." "That's it," I said. "Chain of evidence secured." Karen typed rapidly, sending the alert to the FBI liaison. "They're moving," she said. "Agents en route to her location now." I didn't celebrate. I checked my watch. Margot was supposed to be at a meeting with a lobbyist downtown. The FBI had her under surveillance. If she tried to push more funds or contact her crooked doctor again, they'd be ready. At 5:30 p.m., my burner phone rang. It was the FBI agent, Colonel Crossman. "We've got her," he said. "She's at a private club on M Street transferring funds in real time. We've secured warrants. Our team is going in." I exhaled. Understood. Karen muted her laptop and looked at me. "It's happening." I sat back, the tension in my shoulders heavier than a rucksack. Good document every second. Barlow's phone buzzed with a news alert. "A small army of agents just walked into that club," he said quietly. On the live feed Karen had patched from the liaison's encrypted line. We saw still frames. Margot at a mahogany bar, tablet open, her assistant next to her. Agents moving in quietly, hands on shoulders, confiscating devices. It wasn't dramatic like TV. It was quiet, efficient, decisive. Karen's voice was low. "They're seizing the tablet. Confirmed transfer to Ghost Company. She's caught making an illicit payment to a shell under federal watch." I stared at the screen. My sister's face looked pale, her mouth open mid-protest as an agent showed her the warrant. She wasn't handcuffed yet. White-collar arrests seldom start with cuffs, but the photo said enough. Chain of custody? I asked automatically. Secure, Karen said. Treasury, FBI, and our legal file all match timestamps. Barlow closed his briefcase. This will go to indictment fast. I turned off the monitor. Then we moved to the next step here. That evening, as word trickled back from the FBI, I held a quiet meeting with senior staff in the same boardroom where Margot had once presided. Margot Crossman has been detained by federal agents, I said simply. The company is cooperating fully with the investigation. Your jobs are safe. Your contracts are safe. We are not shutting down. A murmur went through the room. Shock, relief, some disbelief. I let them talk for a moment, then raised a hand. This company will be restructured to operate with transparency. No more shell vendors, no more backdoor deals. We're going to ruin it like my father intended and like our clients deserve. They nodded. Someone in the back said, "About damn time." After the meeting, Karen handed me a flash drive. "Everything we've collected, including today's operation," she said. "Backup copy for your safe." I took it, slipping it into my pocket. "Thank you." "I win," she gave me a tired smile. "This is the cleanest sting I've ever run without a badge." "You've still got the instincts," I said. Later that night, sitting alone in my new office, I looked out over the city lights. My uniform jacket hung on a coat rack near the door. On the desk lay 2 stacks, one of evidence, one of new contracts for legitimate vendors. One pile was the past, the other was the future. I picked up my father's old fountain pen and signed the first clean contract. It felt heavier than any signature I'd ever made. Not a battle won, but a position secured. My phone buzzed with a text from the FBI agent. Margot in custody cooperating, assets frozen, investigation ongoing. I stared at the words for a long moment, then put the phone face down. No rush of vindication, no victory dance, just a deep breath and the knowledge that the trap had closed cleanly by the book without blood. In the quiet of the office, the clock ticked steadily. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets dark and gleaming. For the first time since my father's funeral, I felt the weight on my chest shift from burden to responsibility. The first. Monday after Margot's arrest, the headquarters of Crossman Defense and Logistics felt like a completely different building. No whispering in the halls, no nervous looks at locked doors, just employees walking briskly with files in hand, compliance officers moving through departments, and auditors packing the last of the confiscated records for the FBI courier. The hum of quiet focused. Work was like the low sound of an engine finally running smoothly after being stripped down and rebuilt. I walked into the boardroom wearing my uniform jacket again. Not for show, just a reminder to myself and to everyone else of why this mattered. Barlow was already at the head of the table with a stack of reports, and Karen stood by the screen with that presentation open. "Status?" I asked, setting my coffee down. Barlow flipped through the top report. Payroll stable. Contracts with clean vendors renewed. Suspicious vendors canceled. We've begun refunding over payments to the Department of Defense under voluntary disclosure. That buys goodwill. Le Karen pointed at the screen. FBI investigation is ongoing, but you're no longer a subject. You're a cooperating party. Treasury has confirmed the Swiss funds as clean inheritance, so you're free to use them for legitimate purposes. In audit once. Then it's time to turn the company around. Haspit. We spent the morning mapping out a new structure. Transparent procurement, mandatory ethics training, an independent compliance committee, and a veterans employment program that would recruit directly from bases and VA centers. This isn't just for PR, I said. This is going to be our operating DNA. Karen clicked to the next slide. We've also set up the Crossman Veterans Foundation for Women in Service. As you asked. It's a 501c3 board composed of retired female officers and corporate partners. Initial endowment can come from the Swiss account. Barlow handed me a draft of the foundation's charter. "This is what your father probably hoped for," he said. I read the mission statement aloud. "To support, mentor, and empower women who've served in the U.S. Armed Forces through education, housing, and career advancement. The words felt solid in Mymouth. Good, I said. File it. End quote. We scheduled the launch for 2 weeks out. Not a gala, not a press circus, just a straightforward announcement at the company headquarters with veterans and staff present. Karen handled the logistics with the precision of a field officer. Invitations went out to female veterans groups, military family associations, and select press. No Zenators, no lobbyists. The day of the launch dawned clear and cool. Rows of folding chairs filled the front lobby. American flags lined the walls, but nothing was overproduced. Employees stood shoulder to shoulder with veterans in civilian clothes. The atmosphere felt like a muster before a deployment, quiet, respectful, purposeful. I stepped up to the podium. Cameras clicked, but there were no bright lights in my face. Good morning, I began. Many of you know me as Colonel Evine Crossman. Some of you know me as your new CEO. I want you to know me as something else, as a fellow servant of this country who believes that integrity isn't negotiable. Murmur stilled. This company was built to supply our military. That means every part we ship, every dollar we spend, every contract we sign is a promise to the people who wear the uniform. In recent months, that promise was broken. That ends now. I took a breath. Today we're launching the Crossman Veterans Foundation for Women in Service. This isn't charity. It's an investment in the people who've invested their lives in our country. We'll provide scholarships, housing assistance, and career pathways for women leaving active duty. We'll partner with companies that value integrity as much as we do. The applause that followed wasn't loud or staged. It was steady, genuine. I saw a few of the male veterans wipe their eyes. After the speech, Karen guided small groups of press through the new compliance center, showing them the hotline, the audit process, the independent committee's office. Barlow handed out one-page fact sheets. Simple, direct, no buzzwords. A young journalist asked me, "Why focus on women veterans?" I answered without hesitation. Because they're the fastest-growing segment of the veteran population and the least served. My father taught me that logistics is about getting the right support to the right people at the right time. That's what we're doing. Later, as the crowd dispersed, a retired sergeant major approached me. "Ma'am," she said, "this is the first time a defense contractor has looked me in the eye and said, 'We matter.'" "Thank you." Her handshake was firm, her eyes steady. It was the kind of moment no headline can buy. Back upstairs, the boardroom had been converted into a working office for the foundation. Karen already had volunteers answering calls from veterans interested in the program. Barlow was on the phone with a regional bank about setting up microloans. "This is moving fast," Karen said, handing me a folder of pledges from corporate partners. "They're signing on because they see you're serious." "Good," I said. "Keep the barrier low for entry. We want impact, not red tape." I know praise. By late afternoon, the first press stories went online. Headlines read, Crossman Defense and Logistics launches. Foundation for Women Veterans amid cleanup and new CEO. Army Colonel pledges integrity over profit. The comment sections were surprisingly positive. Barlow shut his laptop. "You've changed the narrative," he said. "I didn't change it," I replied. "I told the truth and gave people something to build on." That evening, I walked the operations floor again. Workers had posted copies of the foundation's announcement next to the time clocks. Someone had taped a handwritten sign above the coffee machine. "We're back on mission." In my office, I opened my father's old fountain pen again and signed the official funding authorization for the foundation. The ink flowed smoothly across the page. NOTA payout, not hush money seed capital for a future my father would have recognized. Karen leaned in the doorway. "We've come a long way from that envelope on your kitchen table," she said. I looked at her. "And we're not done. This isn't just about cleaning up. It's about doing the job right." She smiled faintly. "That's why it's working." I placed the signed document in a fresh folder labeled Foundation and slid it into the drawer. The sound it made paper against wood was the sound of something real being built. Outside, the evening sky turned a pale gold over Arlington. Inside the company and the foundation moved forward, gears meshing, no wasted motion. For the first time since my father's funeral, I felt like the Crossman name stood for something solid again. The courthouse in downtown D.C. smelled of marble polish and paper. Row-soft wooden benches creaked as people shifted. I sat in the front row in uniform, my hair pulled back, a legal pad balanced on my knee. This wasn't a trial. It was a sentencing hearing. Margot sat at the defense table in a gray suit, her trademark poise cracked but not gone. Her lawyer whispered in her ear while federal prosecutors laid out the case. Shell companies, kickbacks, the attempted guardianship fraud, the recorded conversations. It was all there, neat and clinical. Judge Harmon, a former JAG himself, listened without expression. When he finally spoke, the room went silent. "Margot Crossman," he said, "you have pleaded guilty to fraud against the United States government, attempted exploitation of a family member, and obstruction of justice. Taking into account your cooperation since arrest, this court sentences you to 10 years probation under strict financial monitoring, permanent removal from any government contracting roles, and restitution of diverted funds." A low murmur rippled through the courtroom. Margot stared straight ahead. She didn't look at me. She didn't speak. I closed my legal pad and exhaled through my nose. No celebration, no gloating, just a steady release of tension. Justice wasn't a dramatic take-on. It was paperwork, patience, and proof. Outside the courthouse, a few reporters shouted questions. I gave a single statement at the microphones. Crossman Defense and Logistics has cooperated fully with the federal investigation. We have implemented new compliance measures and launched the Crossman Veterans Foundation for Women in Service. Our focus is on integrity and support for veterans. Then I walked away. No sound bites, no drama. Back at headquarters, employees gathered in the break room to watch the news feed. When the sentencing scrolled across the screen, a quiet cheer went up. Not because Margot had fallen, but because the company had survived. Karen met me in my office. That's it. She said she's out. She can't touch the company or the contracts ever again. I nodded. Good. Now we focus forward. Barlow arrived with a fresh stack of reports. Audits complete. Fraud losses recouped. Payroll secure. Foundation funded. He paused. You've done what most people thought was impossible. I poured 3 coffees and handed them out. We all did, I said. This wasn't a solo mission. That afternoon, we held an internal town hall for all staff. No stage, no lights, just me standing in front of a large Crossman logo. You've been through upheaval, he told them. You've seen headlines and rumors. Here's the truth. The company's clean, the contracts are solid, and we're not going anywhere. We will operate with transparency, and we will honor the people who build and use our products. You have my word as a soldier and as your CEO. Applause filled the room, not loud or force, steady and real. In the weeks that followed, the Foundation's work ramped up. We hosted workshops for female veterans transitioning to civilian life. We set up partnerships with housing nonprofits. We launched a mentorship program pairing junior officers leaving the service with corporate leaders. Each time I attended an event, I spoke briefly and directly, avoiding corporate jargon. This isn't charity, I'd say. This is logistics, getting resources where they're needed most. Oh. One afternoon at a small ceremony, a young Navy veteran hugged me. You don't know what this means, she said. I thought I'd be on my own after discharge. Now I've got a plan. Her words hit harder than any press coverage. This was the real payoff. Not headlines, but lives stabilized. Karen kept handling the operational side with the same sharpness she'd used in sea. Barlow became the quiet architect of the company's new compliance culture. Together, we moved from crisis management to building something sustainable. A month after sentencing, I received an official letter from the Pentagon. The Department of Defense was awarding Crossman Defense and Logistics a new long-term contract under its reformed procurement rules. The letter cited exemplary cooperation and renewed commitment to integrity. I read it twice, then called a meeting with senior staff. This contract isn't a prize. It told them it's a responsibility. We're going to fulfill it by the book. Every invoice, every part, no shortcuts. That night, after the building emptied out, I walked the quiet halls. The Foundation office was still lit. Volunteers on phones speaking softly to veterans in need. Down the corridor, engineers were staying late to finish specs for a new project. The company wasn't just surviving, it was alive. I stopped at the display case where my father's medals hung next to a photo of him cutting the ribbon on the first Crossman warehouse. For a long moment, I stood there, the sound of muted voices and keyboard clicks echoing down the hall. "We did it, Dad," I murmured. Not as a boast, but as a report. Mission complete. I turned off the lights, locked my office, and stepped out into the cool Arlington night. The city smelled of rain and exhaust, the sidewalks slick under the street lamps. My security detail kept a discreet distance. Now the threat had passed. In my pocket was a folded card from the first group of female veterans our foundation had helped. Inside, they'd written, "Thank you for fighting for us." I hadn't expected thanks. But holding it, I felt something shift less like vengeance, more like closure. As I walked toward my car, I realized I'd come full circle. From a funeral where I'd been humiliated to a courthouse, where justice was handed down, and now to a company and a foundation built on something better than revenge. It wasn't about winning against Margot anymore. It was about building something she never could. I started the engine, the headlights cutting through the damp night. Another day's work waited tomorrow,